an overview. I am Nan Peterson. I'm with the Planning Department, and I'll be co-facilitating today with Solomon Fortune, who's also in the Planning Department, and he manages our commercial zoning team. There we go. Some of just housekeeping protocols for today. And for our future sessions, the Charlotte Development Center staff will be narrating the presentation. Again, today's presenter is with our planning team, and it's Solomon Fortune. We are also asking for those of you who joined us last week to please enter, we're repeating this, please enter any questions or comments in the chat. We will answer these questions at the end of the presentation. Also, at the end of the session, if time allows, we can answer any additional questions, always through the chat. And if a question cannot be answered, we will so note it at, today, and we will follow up with a response, either posted on our website and hopefully reviewed at next week's session. Our mission statement for the UDO University is that the purpose of the university is to acquaint attendees with the City of Charlotte's requirements and processes affiliated with the currently adopted Unified Development Ordinance known as the UDO. Comments made at the UDO University sessions are intended to provide guidance and are non-binding on the formal review of the development plans. So just a brief overview, we are having 10 sessions. Again, this is session 2. Registration is required for each session. Go to our website. The sessions will be on Fridays from 1 to 2:30. Again, we'll be facilitated by various agencies in the Development Center. And each session will be built upon information provided in previous sessions. Reminder, all sessions are recorded and can be found at the University UDO website under the UDO University tab. And actually, when you go to the screen on the website where you go to register, there's additional columns that will show you the recordings. Thank you. Again, these are our future sessions. I'm hoping to wrap up by the 17th, but we are thinking of possibly adding some additional sessions if needed. Just a real quick recap how the city's initiatives are connected. Again, the 2040 plan is our policies and plans. This is our guidance for growth and development. And the UDO, which we are focusing on, the currently adopted UDO, is the regulations and ordinances to implement the vision. Now, today's session, we're going to begin the review of the UDO regulations, and just want to briefly go over again, making assumptions that not everybody might know some of these planning terms, just to understand where we're coming from. So in the comprehensive plan, they talk is a visionary. It's the adopted city policies intended to guide decisions for the city over the next 20 years. When it comes over to the UDO, then we are showing the mandatory enforceable regulations governing the development within Charlotte. In the comprehensive plans, and you'll hear this a lot through our planning talks, we talk about place types, and place types contain concepts that articulate a vision for different places within the city, such as neighborhoods and centers. They establish a set of general principles that define each of these places. Then Solomon was going to be talking today about zoning districts. So the place types then convert to these zoning districts, which contain legally enforceable rules for development. As such, they are inherently more fine-grained, and as they need to respond to various conditions and characteristics throughout the entire city of Charlotte. And in the comprehensive plan, we talk about concepts such as innovative mixed-use place type. These are newer office, residential, and mixed-use buildings, typically having heights up to 6 stories in this place types. And new buildings are designed with active ground floors to support a vibrant pedestrian environment. They are tall ground floors and a high degree of transparency using clear glass windows and doors. Now, in the regulatory world, we actually go into meaning, okay, what do you mean by tall ground floors and high degree of transparency? And you can see how these concepts then are transferred over into the UDO, into the regulations or the laws. I'm going to turn this over to Solomon now, who's going to go over the purpose of today's session, which is on our zoning overview.
Hello, everybody. My name is Solomon Fortune. I am the commercial zoning supervisor for the city of Charlotte in the Land Development Center in the planning department. Today's meeting purpose is to review the organization of the UDO and the new zoning districts that are applied, and to understand the relationship between place types and zoning districts, and explain what happens to current zoning districts when the UDO is adopted. How to use the UDO. From the previous session, we told you the UDO is broken up into 40 articles and parts that we use for review. As part of it, each section and how you use it is when you go to that section, it gives you kind of the use and what it is you're describing. So for zoning, we typically say the first for zoning you want to look at, keep in mind, is Article 2. Article 2 is the rules of constructions, abbreviations, and definitions. And definitions are terms that we use throughout the UDO and for our review processes. So for example, in definitions, we have the fractional requirement, built upon area, average grade, building length, lot width. Certain definitions also have drawings that are associated with it to help further explain the language. And when it comes to abbreviations, you'll find things such as like build to zone, which shows up as BTZ, ETJ, which stands for extraterritorial jurisdiction, and those other items that you'll find in that definition section. Obviously, the definitions are kind of what we use. That's kind of how we define. If something's not, typically we try to go through when we were developing the UDO to make sure that all the terms that we're using have been defined. And as part of the process, if for some reason there isn't a term defined, then we would have to figure out how we define that term and then where we get that standard and make that standard practice and make that interpretation. Moving on to part 2, it's part 2 in Article 3, we start getting into our zoning introduction. As in for Article 3, we start getting into our zoning map and our frontages. And that is how, with the zoning map, that is how we determine that our map basically shows all the parcels that lie in the city of Charlotte's city limits or ETJ and what is zoned. Typically, Article 3 is going to lay out the zoning district and its hierarchy, the regulations for interpretations of the zoning map, and where the zoning maps are housed. Officially, the zoning maps are housed in the planning department. And right now, for those people, anybody who's been here for a long time, we used to have these ugly green maps that we keep and we printed off. Now it's basically a GIS database, and we would be pulling that data set out to, if someone said they needed a copy and if we needed to, we would then print that full set of that map or that tile that we have as part of our zoning districts. As part of the Article 3, we get into how we measure setbacks. So in your neighborhood 1 district, which is typically a reminder of single family, we have basically said the setbacks are measured from right of way. Neighborhood 2 and above, setbacks are based on frontages. Frontages are determined in conjunction with the Charlotte Streets map, which is maintained by the Charlotte Department of Transportation. And also going through the UDO, there's going to be references to other manuals. Those manuals are separate and they're being updated by the responsible parties and departments that will maintain and update those manuals as required as part of this process and going forth in the future. Also note that, in the neighborhood 2, the setbacks again are measured for frontages through the Charlotte Streets map or also established through the development process. Also going through there in Article 3, you have explanations of those frontages, kind of our hierarchy of how they go down and all the way. There's also language for lots that have multiple frontages, and then the hierarchy of those frontage types. Article 4 through 13. Article 4 through 13, basically, those are the zoning districts, which includes typically the development standards and other requirements that are applicable to that specific zoning district. Typically in Article 4, you are going to see those districts again contain setbacks, lot standards, height, articulation, transparency, open space, and other requirements depending upon your use. Also, when you go through Article 4, when you see it, you may see some references to place types. And place types, as mentioned earlier by Nan, kind of is the policy guide that we use that's going to guide development. But the UDO may make reference to the place types in there. To determine and review place types, go to Charlotte Explorer. You want to click on the link for the 2040 comprehensive plan, and that pulls up your that will pull up the place types of the adjacent and surrounding parcels. And typically the key is pretty easy. It's a color-coded map. And like I said, and it's pretty understandable. And right now, obviously, the place types are just based on that adopted comprehensive plan that was adopted by council last year. As you can see on our next slide, our neighborhood place types, our neighborhood place types show, will show up as neighborhood 1 and then neighborhood 2. So in Article 4, neighborhood 1, N1A through F, N1A obviously is comparable today to R3, B is R4, N1C is R5, and then N1D is R6 and R8, and then N1E is UR1, and then N1F would be townhomes on arterials, which is allowed. Our neighborhood 2, which is Article 5, goes into which would allow into A, it allows townhomes, attached multifamily, and other low residential. Into B allows for townhomes and multifamily developments, and then into C allows for multifamily and townhome dwellings. I'm sorry. As part of it. So for example, in neighborhood 1, you're going to get, you're going to see typically throughout the city, if you're looking back at the residential districts in the previous code, it's going to be single family, churches, and schools. When you start getting into neighborhood 2, you are going to run into, like I said, you're going to start seeing townhomes and multifamily developments. And obviously, when you start looking through our uses table, and we'll talk more about that later on, that you may see different forms and types of, townhomes and multifamily that we have defined and clarified in the UDO going forward. So reading that here, this is the synopsis of the district. N1A through E districts allow for development of single family, duplex, and triplex dwellings on all lots. Additionally, quadruplex dwellings are allowed on arterial streets. In these zoning districts, when an affordable housing is provided with the dwelling, and when an affordable housing unit is provided with the dwelling. The N1F zoning district allows all dwelling types allowed in N1A through N1E zoning districts, as well as small scale townhouse and multifamily dwellings, and is intended for applications typically on arterial streets within the neighborhood 1 place type. The neighborhood 1 zoning district also allows for select non-residential uses such as places of worship, education facilities, and the reuse of existing neighborhood commercial establishments under prescribed conditions. Neighborhood 2 zoning districts are intended to accommodate a mixture of moderate to high density residential development types, and may also serve as a transition between less intense residential development and higher intense mixed use centers. Dwelling types permitted within these zoning districts primarily include multifamily and townhouse dwellings, through lower intensity dwellings, including single family, duplex, and triplex, and quadruplex dwellings are also allowed within the N2A district, or as a component of multifamily development in the N2B zoning district. The neighborhood 2 district also allows for select non-residential uses, again, such as religious institutions, churches, institutional facilities, neighborhood, commercial establishment, and limited mixed-use development. Moving on to the next one is our employment place types. And you can see up here, we have commercial, campus, manufacturing, logistics, and light industrial. In Article 6, it's going to refer to our general commercial and regional commercial. Article 7 is institutional campus 1 and campus 2. And then our office flex campus, and then our research district is also in our article. Article 8, it has our manufacturing logistics, and then Article 9 is our innovation mixed use. The employment districts talk about typically, as you can see here on this slide, the CG General Commercial Zoning District is intended to accommodate areas of general development. Those commercial areas within CG Zoning District accommodate automobile access, and the standards for zoning district acknowledge this auto orientation while encouraging the improvement of the pedestrian environment and accommodation of alternative modal choices within the zoning district. The regional commercial zoning district is intended for areas of large scale or regionally significant commercial uses, may constitute a coordinated cluster of commercial uses, or a single large scale commercial use of regional significance. Moving to our campus district, IC1 and IC2, zoning districts are intended to address the needs and impacts of large-scale institutional campuses, including governmental, educational, medical, social services, continuum of care services, residential developments and religious campuses. The IC2 zoning district is also characterized by a compact development form of taller structures within a densely developed pedestrian oriented environment. The office flex campus zoning district is intended to address large scale offices and research campuses, kind of similar to the RC1 district. Also does the same thing. Manufacturing and logistic districts is the ML1 and zoning district is intended to accommodate a range of warehouse distribution and light industrial uses, including a variety of light manufacturing and assembly. ML2 manufacturing logistics zoning district is intended to accommodate industrial uses, including those uses which may be hazardous or noxious. Such uses may have significant external impacts and may include large operations of outdoor storage or operation. The innovative mixed use district, the IMU zoning district, is intended to accommodate those areas that have typically developed as industrial areas, but are transitioning from an exclusively industrial orientation to a broader mix of light industrial, artisan industrial, commercial, and moderately density residential uses and a more walkable environment. The IMU zoning district standards encourage and accommodate the adaptive reuses of existing structures. So going back to some of those commercial districts, thinking CGCR, kind of think of it as I like to say, kind of think of like you're getting your individual uses on lots. So like McDonald's, which is auto-orientated, Chick-fil-A, small strip malls. You may see some start moving up into a little larger retail for those uses. When you go to your institutional campuses, start thinking about like Queens College. I kind of consider like Atrium, Maine downtown, in Novant, Presbyterian, where you're getting in those large, districts and, and numerous religious facilities across town where they have large campuses that, that would kind of go in there. Your manufacturing and, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Research campus, kind of think of it like research, kind of think of like Wells Fargo CIC up there in the university where they're a massive campus, but kind of they have confirms things where you kind of can't see what they're doing in there, but once you go in there, there's large fields of parking, there are giant buildings, they have a lot of services internal for their employees that help easy it and allow them to for their work and employment throughout the day. Moving into your manufacturing and logistics, kind of think of Amazon, Siemens, the intermodal yard by the airport where you're starting getting into those logistics. Your innovation mixed use districts, kind of think of it as North Tryon Street as you're heading out of town, and as you start moving to, and then like along Graham Street, Camp North End, where you're starting to see some of those brewery type uses, office uses starting to mix with some of those still minor industrial uses around there. Moving on to the next one is, our centers place types, which you will see on our map, that start to go with the neighborhood center, our community activity center, and then our regional activity center. Our neighborhood center is in Article 10. Also in Article 11, you then have your community activity center 1 and community activity center 2. Moving into Article 12, you have our regional activity center, then our Uptown Edge, our Uptown Core, and then also Article 13 is our transit-oriented development districts. In our center zoning districts, the neighborhood center district NC is intended to support a pedestrian-friendly mixed-use neighborhood environment, allowing access to daily shopping needs and services within walking distance of nearby residential neighborhoods. The NC district also provides for a mix of commercial and service uses closely integrated within surrounding residential neighborhood fabric to support the concept of a complete neighborhood. Both vertical and horizontal mixed use development is encouraged. Our community activity center districts, CAC1, is intended to accommodate areas that are transitioning from a more automobile-centric orientation towards a more walkable, well-connected, moderate intensity mix of retail, restaurant, entertainment, office, and personal service uses, including some residential uses. CAC2, the Community Activity Center District, is intended to accommodate a moderate intensity mix of retail, restaurant, entertainment, office, and personal service uses, as well as residential uses in a comfortable pedestrian environment that is easily accessible and well connected to the surrounding neighborhoods. Our regional activities center is intended to accommodate major employment locations, cultural destinations, and mixed-use development that serves both the local and regional markets. The Uptown Edge District is intended to address areas of transition between the high-intensity environment of the Uptown core and adjacent smaller scale mixed-use areas and urban neighborhoods. The Uptown core is our most intense mixed-use development within the Charlotte zoning district standards and encourages a predominantly vertical mixed-use environment and are focused on supporting a vibrant pedestrian city to activate Center City. Our transit-oriented development, Todd UC, is appropriate for parcels near high-intensity rapid transit stations and streetcar stops. Our Todd NC districts are intended for use in existing or future transit stops and near streetcar stops. The Todd CC Transit Community Center is appropriate for parcels near moderate intensity and rapid transit station and streetcar stops. The Todd TR Transition is appropriate for parcels near moderately intensity rapid transit station and streetcar stops to transition from higher intensity transit oriented development zoning districts to adjacent neighborhoods. So kind of think about going through there. When you see your neighborhood center, I kind of like to think of those as those are your standard grocery centers where, you know, you're going to see your Food Lions, your Harris Teeters, Save a Lot, all those, where there's also some supporting starts where you're going to see some automobile centric, where you're going to see some fast food restaurants along there. That's kind of where they're near neighborhoods. When you start getting your community activity center, I kind of like to think of like Ayersley, the shops at the university, where you're now getting a larger scale, Cotswold, larger scale, retail, higher amounts. More, you're gonna get some auto where you're gonna get some walking ability connecting to neighborhoods. Moving into your regional activity centers, think of those examples as I like to say South Park Mall, North Lake, Perimeter Woods, even Bellgate that has IKEA, where though they are attracting all over the state and all over the region for people to come and shop, live, work. TOD, as most of us know, think of South End, University City Station, where you're seeing seeing that development, lots of residential, lots of commercial all along South Boulevard, Parsons Street Station, all along there. Going in our ordinance, all those districts carry typical zoning standards. Each UDO district includes development standards and other requirements that are applicable to that specific zoning district. They may include some or all of the following. Lot standards typically refer to area, width, building coverage. Building sitting, there's setbacks, build to zones, build to percentage. Building height, there's maximums. Some districts have maximums, minimums, and maximums with bonus. Building articulation, which includes building length, blank wall area, minimum ground floor height, prominent entry spacing, the net transparency, which is ground floor and upper story. Building design, which include facade modulation, our building base, entry, design, parapet walls, and building materials. Open space, you'll see in there, we have public, common, and private. For parking, we have our minimums, some uses have minimums, some have maximums. Then there's also bicycle and design of lots and parking structures. And then also some zoning standards are loading and service, including solid waste and loading docks. And then we have our landscaping and screening, planning, landscaping yards, and required screening, and then signs. And obviously, and further on, like with parking, loading, and service and landscaping, we are going to have actual UDO classes that go into each of those sections in further depth. So if you don't know, the UDO was, as it's been adopted, it is now scheduled to go online on June 1st. And at June 1st, we will have a zoning district translation. Basically, if you go through this chart, any conventional zoning district in effect before the effective date of this ordinance will translate as this table is shown in 3.1. And then here's kind of a chart that we have that shows the district translations. The new standards set forth in this ordinance for these districts shall apply to the properties with these zoning districts. Conditional districts and optional districts in effect before the effective date of this zoning are addressed in section 1.4-C. So currently right now, we are saying if you have an approved conditional plan, we have basically said that they will stay and you will be able to use those entitlements. If you're going to seek entitlements on I'm sorry, not seeking title limits. If you're actually going to develop, we would be using this ordinance, the previous legacy ordinance, and allow that for that development. Also in our zoning districts, we also have some overlays that are required that typically that get established through rezoning for these overlays. In Article 14, we have an overlay for the historic district, and those standard, typically those right now, as we know Dilworth, Wilmore, we have the various ones that we have throughout the community. Article 14, we also have another one, which is cottage courts, which cottage courts allows for kind of some single, small lot, single family to look kind of inward, building on open space. That was kind of the ideal. And then also in Article 14, we have a neighborhood character overlay, which kind of is an overlay that a neighborhood can kind of set up, which if someone develops in this overlay, basically it's kind of like they would set up design standards, kind of like maybe setbacks, kind of like if you develop, you have to kind of comply with these additional standards in this overlay district. And then we have our residential infill overlay that has standards for, obviously, if you're going to do infill residential uses. Also in Article 14, there is a manufactured home overlay, which is typically, as we, kind of think of it as, we kind of call them like modular homes, things like that. In the industry, there's different terms. And also then there's your manufactured home park, I kind of think of those kind of like mobile homes, kind of along that lines. And then also there is, that we did not add on this slide, there's also an HDO, it's going to be street side, which is kind of like for some of those commercial uses where they're adjacent to historic districts. They don't necessarily have all the standards of the historic district, they kind of have modern, but it's kind of providing some of that historic quality and preservation to the historic district adjacent parcels around it. And then kind of Article 14, the airport noise disclosure overlay, basically kind of is putting in general terms, as you guys know, this is the overlay that we have for jet engine noise. That's kind of like if you're in there, there's certain standards that some design use. Kind of think of it as with Charlotte Douglas moving up and being larger, we are trying to keep those, trying not to get residential uses put at the end of the runway, because as we all know, Charlotte Douglas is becoming extremely busy and is moving up the chain in most busiest airports in the United States. Now, moving on, we go into Article 15, which is basically your uses. In the use chart, it basically has the uses on the left going down. It has the uses on the right going across. It gives you the zoning districts. If there's an X, that means it's allowed in that district by right. If there is a PC, that means it has prescribed conditions, and then there's some additional standards that you have to meet. And we have references if there's referring you to another section in the UDO that it will refer to that you have to comply with. If there is a gray box, that means it is not allowed in that district. And kind of like if you go through there in the UDO, there is numerous, we've kind of broken them up by kind of like residential, retail, commercial, kind of industrial, and we go through there as part of, and that's how we determine when someone asks us about, is it a use allowed in a district? Future UDO sessions that we will review, we are going to talk more about Article 9 that still apply to zoning. There's Article 19, which is off-street vehicle and parking, bicycle parking. Think of those are parking spaces, vehicle, kind of that's, bike racks, where they're located long-term, short-term. Article 20, landscaping and screening. Think of that, those are screening of parking spaces, parking structures, parking spaces, utilities, buffers, which in the old words we call buffers, but now we're calling them landscape yards. Those are those requirements. And then tree preservation is referring to the section that the tree ordinance, urban forestry would be handling. Article 21 is loading spaces. Think of those as loading docks, service areas, places, where we have on site where it is for FedEx, UPS, semi trucks when they're offloading for those use. And then also we will have another session on the Charlotte street maps and how to use it, because again, for our frontages and zoning, we do make reference to those, and that is how you determine a lot of your, not a lot, all your yards. I'm sorry, we're not yards anymore, we call them setbacks. You can visit the UDO and visit our website, and we will register for, you can register for these sessions. There's a link to email questions about the UDO. There's also links to all the supporting documents that we are working on that we will be updating, but also you can see those and where they are. And then just to let you, again, as we mentioned before, all those supporting documentation is in the process of being updated to incorporate the UDO requirements. Getting to this, we have gone through this. I know we've kind of blown through it a lot in about basically 35 minutes. We will get ready to answer the questions in the chat. I guess the one thing I will say, I appreciate everybody taking time. I will tell you, yes, we are receiving questions and we apologize for the delay. We also want to tell people, kind of saying it's no excuse for us as government, but we are also telling you guys that my team and a lot of the zoning teams in Subtle Avenue and Stormwater, Urban Forestry, CDOT, we are still also reviewing all our projects that are coming in under the legacy code. And as you guys know, just by looking out your window and driving through Charlotte, there is a lot of development going on. So if someone has emailed us, we have not forgotten you. Like I tell people right now, I go in my email box, there is probably over 100 emails that I am going through and updating. So again, it's no, like I said, we apologize, but we have not forgotten about you. We still have it. So if you haven't heard from us, it's not that we're blowing you off. Like I said, we are just taking our time and going through. So with that begin, we will start going through the questions in the chat.
Gotcha. So what I'm going to do, we do have a couple of questions in the chat that were answered. So just so that they are in the recording, I'm going to go ahead and read those out with the answer. Thank you. We have CDOT folks in here who are kind of helpful in the chat. The first question, and they are similar, came from Thomas and then Michael. Is there a way to correlate the idea of arterial with the road classification shown in the streets maps? And additionally, how does one determine if a street is arterial? And the answer to that, thank you to Brandon, is that the streets maps table, the streets manual table 1.1 specifies streets map cross sections and corresponding road classifications, i.e. parkways, boulevards, avenues, and main streets are arterials. So thank you for that. Additionally, he pointed out that it is on page 5 in the streets manual, if you would like to find that. The next question we have is, hello, and it's from Kalia. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. Do the districts take into account the decibel levels emitted from specific zoning districts and their distance from residential? Are there regulations for noxious orders distance from the residential zoned areas? That's a tongue twister. Where can I locate this information? So it looks like she's specifically asking about decibel levels within specific zoning districts.
So typically, to answer your question, typically decibels, sound is governed by a different area, or it's in the city code, and typically that is sound. Yes, in the zoning ordinance, there's a provision of kind of, we've had for industrial kind of like you can't noxious, but it's typically in regards to measuring it, that is handled by a different ordinance, not necessarily the zoning ordinance itself.
Stas has asked, and it's been answered, I'm going to read it as well. Is R6 and R8 merging into one zoning, as I saw on the chart referencing the presentation? Thank you. Both Matt and Alan did respond. Both R6 and R8 will translate into a single district, and that is N1D. Okay. The next question is for duplexes, and it comes from Eddie. For duplexes in the N1A zoning district, is the minimum lot size for dwellings 10,000 square feet with a minimum lot width of 70? Does this result in a 5,000 square foot lot and 35 lot width for each duplex dwelling? You might want to read that. You may want to pull that up on your screen just to be sure that you can. And it's from Mr. Eddie Moore.
So I think, Eddie, we may have to follow up with you on that one to give you more. Kind of in general, the UDO, what it is it depends upon how you are, I guess to say how, is it a for sale, what you're doing with that duplex? Because I guess to say in theory that works, but how the ordinance, the UDO is setting up, it's saying you would have to have that minimum lot width and that minimum lot size. And I guess how, then it would be how that, how your client's going to then, like I said, is it a for sale? Is he creating that sublot? How he's gonna, subdivide it.
Okay, thank you for that. Carolyn asks, what use/article do the adult skill/fishing game businesses allow predominantly in East and West Charlotte? You're asking where they're located. And I'll read that again. What use/article? Is it, do you find possibly? The adult skill/fishing game businesses allow predominantly in East and West Charlotte. Someone laughed, so I'm thinking it is an actual question though. So. And Carolyn, if you want to elaborate in the chat, I don't know, Nan or Solomon, you're able to answer.
So answering in, going into UDO, typically we have considered that kind of a retail personal service use. Typically it's allowed throughout all of Charlotte. So it's not particularly limited to one side of town.
Okay, so she elaborated just a bit. Where are they going to be allowed in the UDO? So I think you just answered that.
And so to be allowed, so basically it would be like in our, in our CRCG districts.
Okay. Josh asks, do the maximum building coverage limit listed in table 4.3 apply to construction that is not under roof? Pools, such as pools, sport courts, terraces, etc. And again, that is, do the maximum building coverages limits listed in table 4.3 apply to construction that is not under roof, i.e. pools, sports courts, terraces, etc.
One second. So Josh, let me follow. We have your contact information. Let us follow up on this one because I believe there are several people that have questions on that one.
John asked, at this time, what would be the best district for small scale or standalone offices?
I mean, I think right now it would be your it would be your CR and your CG based off of the UDO.
I'm sorry, say that one more time. You said CR and CG?
Yes, in your commercial.
Okay. Justin asks or states, I have a client wanting to put an event space in an I2 zone building on North Tryon. It will switch to ML2 and the event space is not an approved use anymore. Is there anything to do other than rezone the property?
So I guess, Justin, if you can clarify in the chat, are you trying to, when are they trying to get, because I guess say if they're submitting under I2, currently it would be allowed. So I guess the question is your client waiting until the UDO gets adopted? Or no, I'm sorry, adopted, goes into effect, I'm sorry.
Which is June 1st.
So if you submit, if you submit prior to June 1st, we would use those I2 standards. And if not, then we would, and like I said, and if the translation, if it is going to ML2, then we would look at, you would be then allowed the uses under an ML2.
We have the next question is institutional use, church, etc. in N1A still allowed with collector street frontage? How about N1B, C?
That is correct. If it had collector street frontage, yes, we would still allow that in those districts.
Sorry. The table in section 4.3, and this is Josh. I don't know if Josh, I think you had a question earlier. I don't know if this is any clarification to that, but the table in section 4.3 shows the minimum lot width for N1B, 8,000 square feet at 60 can an existing residential lot that is more than 8,000 square feet. But sorry, my screen is freezing, but is only 50 wide, be redeveloped, existing single family torn down and replaced with new construction single family house. And this is referencing the table in section 4.3. If you want to reference that.
So the answer in general, yes, it would be allowed if it's obviously assuming it has the residential zoning and that use is allowed in the district. Yes, you would be allowed because it would be an existing lot. And we have standards for non-conforming lots in the UDO.
The definition of a townhouse in the UDO is 5+ units on a sublot. This is from Jenna. What if the townhouse is less than 5 units on a sublot? That is a use considered.
If it's less than now it gets into we call it a triplex, quadruplex, and then there's multifamily stacked and multifamily attached in the UDO.
Sorry, it's muted. B2 used to allow planned multifamily uses with conditions. Does the new translated zoning classification still allow such on the latest UDO version? And then Alan, I think, was answering, I'm not sure if it, building coverage, the portions of a lot developed with principal buildings and accessory structures.
Okay. Yep. That's for Josh. Yes, thank
Josh,
you.
okay, perfect. Thank you. And again, I can repeat that last question if you.
Yes, I'm looking at that one.
Okay.
So what is B2 translate?
Yeah.
Translate to? Hold on one second.
CG.
So let's see here. Uses. Residential uses, dwelling, multifamily.
And then if you have the ability, let's make Alan a co-host so that he may be able to, if he has any additional information he may be able to provide, he can unmute if you'd like to. Thank you.
So right now, we are saying in those right now, we are saying no, that you don't have residential in those in the B2 district. When you go by the on 15 table 15-1, the use matrix.
Okay. Eddie has a follow-up on the duplex question. I don't know if you can see that chat, Solomon.
Yep, we can see it.
Yes.
The follow-up on the duplex question says they are by right in N1A and other N1 districts for sale duplexes with a property line splitting the units. Will each lot or sublot have to meet the minimum width? Thanks.
No, typically even today's standard, your lot has to meet the width, whatever for that district. So basically it would be to do a duplex, you have to have that minimum lot area. And then your sublot is basically not necessarily, it's the lot, but the zoning definitions and our requirements are basically referring to the overall lot itself. And then your sublot is the land that you aren't necessarily deeding with that duplex unit. So we have not said that obviously the lot itself is meeting that standard in the UDO.
Josh asks, section 4.1 says N1D is for residential dwellings on lots 4,000 square feet or greater. The table in section 4.33 lists the minimum lot area for M1D as 3,500 square feet. Why are these different? This is section 4.1, and then the table in section 4.3.
Yeah, I'll
Thanks,
jump in.
Alan.
This is Alan Goodwin. Let me jump in and clarify that. The 4.1 is a general purpose statement, and this was drafted earlier, and subsequent to that, we decreased the minimum lot size for the N1D district. So the table is the correct number. The 3,500 is the correct minimum lot size. So thank you for catching that. We will make a note to go back and change that 4,000 in Article 4.1 to match up with the right number, which is 3,500.
Thank you, Alan. Thomas states per earlier conversation, I'd forgotten that a companion document for CDOT is technically part of this UDO, though not unified into it. Are there any other council adopted companion documents that clarify items or additional requirements? I am not including departmental guidelines that are not council guided.
Thomas, we will have to follow up you from zoning. The ones for zoning are listed in there. I mean, I know the ones that we are working on, the manuals are like our fee in lieu and some of the bonus structure that they are working on for people, but other than that, and then you know, that's all we have. And then obviously when you go out to the references that we have, those are the ones that we are working on.
Jake points out that the streets map itself is also technically a companion document and is council adopted, which is
Right.
true. Alan did put in the chat, and I'm thinking it's clarifying one of the previous questions. Places of worship are allowed by right in all neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2 districts without conditions. I think that was in reference to an earlier question.
Yes, my understanding is that it's no longer a requirement that they be on a collector street in those districts.
No, and that's correct. It's not, but when they ask the question, it's like, yeah, if you're on a collector, yes, it would be allowed, but that's correct.
Thank you. And then looks like we may have one final question right now. Please continue to put questions in the chat if you have them, or we will again tell you how you can email us with those questions. But this one says perhaps the discussion will be in future sessions, but if possible, please go over how the previous cluster residential development is being translated to the new UDO. For example, current ordinance and tree ordinance allows R3 to go down to R4 with 10% tree save. R3 goes to R5 with 25% tree save. What are the new translated rules?
So if you go in there, there is in the neighborhood, there is a not conservation, there is a as I was reading, I just actually answered someone's question on it. I forgot. Let me get you the official name of it. We have an alternative residential development options in 4.5, and then it has a conservation residential development. If you look at that section here, that will probably is your answer. And it's talking about your how to reduce, it gives you, when you read it, it is all lots within the conservation residential development shall front on a street or a common open space. And then it's talking about basically when you do this and it gives you the districts, it says you have to have a minimum of 2 acres in area. And then it says the lots within this conservation development shall meet the requirements of the underlying zoning district with the exception of the following. Minimum lot areas may be reduced by 50%. Maximum building coverage does not apply of lots 5,000 square feet or less in the lot area. And then it has minimum setbacks. And then it's telling you what you have to do as part of the additional open space and what you have to have. So it's saying In addition to any open space, tree save otherwise, 10% of the site area of a conservation village comprise, sorry, everybody, common open space, and at least 50% of the common open space area shall be tree saved per the requirements and allowances of Article 20. Common open space shall be designed as the following. And if you go through there, that is kind of the requirements. And then obviously we have some of the overlays that give you the like residential infill that has some different requirements. But basically what you're referring to is you want to look at that conservation residential development in 4.5, Article 4, 4.5.
Thank you, Solomon. That is the end of the questions. What I did do just for, and continue, we're here for another 7 minutes. If you guys need to ask any questions, I did drop in the email address that you can email in the chat. If you have additional questions that happen to come up after this session that you'd like clarification or answers for, please feel free to reach out via that email address that is in the chat. If we have no
Reminder,
more,
next
I'm sorry,
week's
go ahead.
session. Oh, next week's session is on tree protection articles of the UDO.
Thank you, Thomas says he can't wait. I'm excited about trees.
No worries.
Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Looks like we have come to the end of our chat. Again, if you have additional questions, please let us know and email us.
And yes, we will say thank you. And I do know that we are trying to, once we go to the UDO, we are talking about having sessions that we can have with you guys where it's just basically it is kind of just more questions and there's no presentation. So that way we and have all the responsible reviewers,
Agencies.
agencies and administrators, so that way we can answer additional questions. Thank you for your time, and I hope you guys all have a great weekend.
Thank you.